Our next speaker is going to speak about architecture. One thing that we can't help but notice is the building that we are in right now. It's a very old building, not hundreds of years old, but it has been very tastefully renovated in the past couple of years. With a very modern influence, combined with a very old architecture, the original architecture here. Now that, if anything, is a good example of bridging borders, borders between old and new. And speaking on the topic of architecture, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Sergejev.
Everybody seems to be standing in this corner, so I guess I'll do the same. So my name is Sergejev, and I'm an architect. I am this evil person that separates you and the lunch, so I'll try to get through my stuff quickly. So to start with, I want to see what the definition of borders is. For me, personally, definitions are the borders of barriers. They're obstacles and frames that need to be overcome or torn down. They could also be points of contact, or areas where one thing ends and the other one begins, or nothingness between the objects. Like, for example, in this case, between the water and the oil, there is actually nothingness. Or the indecisiveness, like political borders. Can I be here? If I step there, what happens? Will they kill me? Something which is unpopulated, unusable. But borders for me, when I started preparing this speech, borders have a very strong personal relationship with borders, as well as professional. And I think maybe I'll start with personal for now. Well, to start with, I'm from Narva, and that is a border. It is a border of Estonia, right there, the easternmost point. It is also the border of the European Union. When I was preparing the speech, I was about to say that it was the easternmost point of the European Union, and it is not, actually, unfortunately. But still, we're right there. And, we're pretty much defined by Narva is defined by its border, on the border location. It's a pretty gray area. Thankfully, in Silamaya, they built, a special parking zone for the trucks just recently, so the trucks are not standing for miles and miles outside the entrance into Narva. But still, there's not a lot going on in there. And that also results in Narva being slightly isolated. So it's not only on the border, it has all the attributes of the border. It's this nothingness, indecisiveness, it's a weird zone. For which I'm very grateful to the Tartu University to build this thing in there. A piece of great architecture and definitely bridging the border there. So yeah, awesome. Good job. Second border, which is very personal, is obviously the language border. First Estonian, then English. I'm a native speaker of Russian language, so for me to learn and speak Estonian was something I needed to learn and do consciously. Thankfully, my parents, the school I used to go to, we studied Estonian starting the first grade and onwards, and English the same thing, so thankfully it wasn't much of the problem once I went to the Academy of Arts. But it's funny because I'm now watching my fiance, who's American, and she's in Estonia right now, and she's having a hell of a time understanding what is going on around her, because nothing is in English. And then probably the strongest border that all of us run into are the perceptions of either our own perceptions or the perceptions of people for us, so to say. Like, for example, for me, you can read it down there. I used to go to the Academy of Arts because that's the only place in Estonia you can receive, well, that used to be the only place in Estonia you could receive the architectural education in. And when I was in Narva in my 11th, 12th grade, I used to hear a lot that it's for Estonian nationals only. If you speak Russian, you don't go. Stupid, right? But people totally believed it. Well, I studied in the Estonian Academy of Arts and I'm very happy about it, so not for native Estonians only. Try it. Fulbright, the same thing. When I started applying for Fulbright, which I just returned from, they were saying, oh no, that's for lawyers and policy majors, that's a diplomatic thing. You architects, what are you talking about? Well, still, I used to go to Virginia Tech for 2 years and then worked in New York for another year and all through the Fulbright, which is thank you. So yeah, not for lawyers and policy majors only. And the third one, which is the most recent one probably, I don't know if you know these guys, if you've seen this building anywhere. This is the CCTV, the China Central Television Headquarters in Beijing, China. It's not my project, it's the project of the guys I worked for, OMA. And when I studied in school in the master's degree, I used to have a perception that you can only get into that office because it's so high level. if you are from an Ivy League school. Pretty much everyone, once I got in, I realized that most of the people I was in the hall with or in the office with were Harvard graduates, which made me feel kind of good with Virginia Tech, but not for Ivy League only. So those are my personal borders. Now architecture, more professional borders. Remember the diagram, personal, professional? This is professional. Architecture is nothing else but a profession of glorified border making. I mean, the envelope of a house is nothing but a border, which separates us from lions, weather, other people. It's cozy and nice in there. It's a border between the inside and the outside. This border can get real sophisticated sometimes. Like, for example, this is a section through a facade of a department store in Birmingham, UK. It's not a simple one. This is not how most of the buildings get built. But for example, right, this is the actual facade, elements, which are the beauty part. Then you have the water resistant layer, then you have the insulation, then you have the concrete, then you have the plaster, you have the metal, like all sorts of things are intermixed, and that's only a border which you don't even see. The only thing you see are those plates on the front and the plaster in the back. Everything in between, you don't. So the border is not just a line, the border contains something. Same thing with floors. That's another very great architectural border. Different floors are separated from each other. If we didn't have staircases or elevators, we would not be able to travel between them, obviously. There is actually a very interesting cartoon which appeared in Life magazine in 1909, just when they started building skyscrapers, that basically, theoretically speaking, you could build a whole different world on each floor and they would be totally independent. That was like the days of glory in New York, so to say. Social borders. When we don't want certain people, we put them inside a border. So that's a panopticon prison, 1791. And politics, Berlin Wall. We all know what that is. Administration. This building is a very clear border between us and everybody, all the guys sitting in there. It's not a border in a literal sense, but it is a very clear distinction between the world of the common people and the guys who run the common people, so to say, at least in New York. And then city planning, obviously, this is Pyhätallinn. This is where, Copley Street is right there. So this is the border that is made up by all the railroad infrastructure in Tallinn. And then, so yeah, as you see, there is a lot of borders in architecture, and we enjoy making those borders and making them complex too. But what we also like is once we do a border, we want to transgress it. We want to get over it. We want to be like, well, now that we've made it, why don't we, do something else with it? For example, a window. The simplest way of crossing an architectural border. You have a wall, you have a window. You can see outside now. But still, the cold and, the people don't get in. We wish we could do, this is glass generally. This is like taken to the max, and this is an actual building. It's in Sweden, and it's a hotel, and it's stuck on top of a tree, and it's surrounded by glass, so it totally blends in with its environment. And from the inside, you feel like you're all, in the forest. There's nothing else. So this is like the glass or the window taken to the ultimate. But the funny thing is that it's still a physical border, so you can actually get through it. If anybody has seen the film or the movie, Elysium, anybody here? No? Did you remember how, there is the space station, Elysium, right? And then there is space. There is no actual border between the space station and the space. It's all the gravity that does the job. So the atmosphere of the space station doesn't escape purely because of the gravity. And I think that's beautiful. That's like the only thing I remembered from the movie is that, oh my goodness, there is no border between space and the habitat. That's like awesome. At the same time, it makes total sense, right? But we wish we could do that on Earth, to have a glass which you can just walk through and nothing happens. But we can't, at least for now. Anyway, elevators let us, span between floors or bridge the borders that floors are, or even atriums, like the Guggenheim Museum, for example, by Frank Lloyd Wright. And then there's weird diagram, but basically what I'm trying to say is savoring borders. As I said, borders are not just lines, they could be, there is stuff inside them. And we as architects, we love the stuff inside the borders, because that's kind of undefined space that we could do anything we want with. So for example, this is Frank Gehry. He is like the master of savoring borders, so to say. You can see how poetic and beautiful this building is. The matter of the fact is, it's right here. All of that. Sorry, I'm showing with this. I'm a very manual person. I don't like this stuff. But the actual whole is square. So everything between is kind of a border. So you're not, when you're here, you're not outside, but you're not in the hole yet. So you're not right where you came here, like you're not quite in touch with what you came here for, but you're not outside either. You know, and that's, in architecture, a lot of times that's where the most beautiful space happens, between the actual program, so to say, and the outside world. And yeah, we do love that stuff. For example, this is Zaha Hadid in China, right? This is the outside skin. That's the actual, you know, opera hall. Or here in Rome, Renzo Piano, you can see that the building itself actually looks like this outside, but then there is a very rational volume inside it. And in between those two, you have the escape staircases, the lobbies, and stuff like that. You know, Basilica del Fiore in Rome, some of the most awesome spaces again. But then there are much more philosophical borders as to what's possible. And then there are certain, let's say, you know, holy grails of architecture, like gravity, or gravity again, or immobility, because architecture doesn't move, or, you know, free will. Architects don't hate free will, but we would like everybody to love our architecture without actually saying, you know, that looks like everybody else. Why can't I get something special? So I wanted to show you a few pictures of the buildings I thought that could fly, meaning that they were transgressing certain borders, these philosophical borders. Like, for example, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona by Antoni Gaudi. You know, it's a building which transgresses the time. The architect he died in 1926. The building is still being built. How do you make a building, how do you code your building in such a way that they can build it and design will look as if you built it, but it's like 100 years later? That's amazing. So with his work, he spanned the dimension of time. And you see it's pretty far from being done. The yellowish kind of whatever thing is what's built, and then everything else is not. So there's a long way to go. This is his process. He overcame quite a few technical borders on his way, something we're just trying to understand right now. And he did that 100 years ago. And this results in some absolutely beautiful space. And then the guys I used to work for in New York, like for example, this building, the China Central Television Headquarters, which was supposed to be the, instead of building a skyscraper, which is just two extruded things, he built it into a loop and said, why not? You know, let's put the public inside. So you have a massive building, what do you typically do? You build a skyscraper. And he said, well, that's too usual. Why don't we overcome the border? Why don't we think wider? So he made a loop, the same volume. And, you know, there is a lot of very interesting programmatic things going on. But for me, this is this stuff which kind of catches my imagination, because this is 75 meters. That's Vito Hotel put on its side, hanging in the air. You know, and that's how you arrive at defying gravity in architecture. So although the building doesn't really fly, it kind of does in a certain way. At least it gets as close to it as possible. I mean, my own work tries to do the same thing, you know, spanning things and putting them, as you see, up in the air, and maybe even doing a little bit more of a philosophical thing. Like, for example, for my thesis project, I was trying to expose the data center, the most secretive typology of architecture in the modern world, pretty much. You know, like it's hidden so far away you don't even know it. So what happens in the cloud? Where is the cloud? You know, cloud is there. Where is this? Nobody knows. And then the data centers are growing rapidly. So, and they're, for example, in the state of Virginia, this is the state of Virginia for those who don't know, the 1/6 of electricity consumption, 1/6, goes to data centers. Well, obviously Virginia is one of the major data center locations. There's, especially like up here near to DC with all the pentagons and stuff nearby, you know, they need a lot of data. So that's not surprising, but still, if that's the 1/6, and then let's say in 5 years we're gonna make the amount of data centers twice the time that they are right now, how many electricity stations do we need to buy, to build for that? Obviously a very secretive thing, as I said. You know, I had to sign this agreement in order to get into one of those things. But the point I was trying to make is that through multiplicity of nodes, you can actually make them into public buildings without compromising security at all. So with this project, I was trying to, to skip. Everybody's saying they have to be secure, and I said, oh, maybe not. Why don't we do them not secure outside? Why can't people use them? So if anybody is interested in the idea of data centers and making them public, let me know. I'll hang around. So yeah, borders, personal architectural. In architecture, what we do a lot is synthesize things. We take multiple ideas, we put them into one whole, and then that's a building. You know, a building has so many different things to it. It has the piping, it has the heat, it has the lighting, it has the walls. On the outside of the walls, it's the insulation, so on and so forth. But we put that into one shape, which looks beautiful and then works as well. So what I'm thinking is I would like to synthesize the personal architectural into one and live with this idea that we are the buildings that fly. If we want to define, there is still gravity and the buildings don't fly, but if you try hard enough, you might just as well end up with a beautiful building with a huge cantilever, and that'll be you, and that's awesome. So defying gravity is the way to go. So thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, one question.
Thanks. That talk was way too fast. I'd like to
Sorry,
hear more.
there was a lot of information inside.
Yeah, my question is about the data centers. So, are they like a perfect way to make huge public sculptures because they're not for people, actually for data?
Well, see, yeah, I was kind of trying to get there. What I learned in the process is that they're not perfect sculptures. They're really high. There is a very strict set of criteria you have to follow in order to build a data center. But like my point was that, okay, you build all the other data centers, why don't you build at least one, which is actually interesting.
Show those, yeah, nice things.
Oh, thank you. I guess the theory is not that interesting, right? But the point was about, yeah, if you have a multiple, like this was the state, let's say 20 years ago. There were only that many computers in the world, that many data centers. Nowadays, it's that many. That's how many there are, or not that how many, but there are more. And they're multiplied all across the globe. Your Facebook information is being backed up like 1 million times. So even if one of them blows up, nothing actually happens. You won't even notice it. That's why I was thinking, okay, if somebody does come, like the major threat to a data center is literally that somebody comes in with a bomb and blows it up, basically. Because you get so much when you do that, you used to blow up a building, you kill a few people, and maybe some, damage. If you blow up a data center, you blow up Facebook, Google, you hold, banks. It's like it's a major node and it has to be protected. But that's what I was kind of trying to get at, that if it's backed up so many times, it actually doesn't. It enters the stome of a rhizome where it's so, the multiplicity is so, inside that even if one of those things gets cut, nothing actually happens to the system generally. So why not open a building to the public enjoyment? That was kind of the point.
Just the overall shape caught my eye. Because it doesn't have to be an everyday living environment.
Exactly, yes. And it doesn't have to behave according to human norms, right? Because most of the things are computerized anyway. Like the data center I went to was in DC area, and most of the work was done actually from Austin, Texas. Like they were monitoring it, from a huge distance, basically across the states, and there were only like 4 or 5 people inside the thing. If something does get broken, then they kind of go and take the thing out, put it on the trolley, get it out, put the new one in, kind of thing. It's a very dumb sort of situation, or like operation thing. So it could be a machine on an urban scale. Can you imagine like a, how do you call it? A USB drive, right? Like just do this, and then imagine this like 200 feet tall and stuff.
I think next the slides were just like that. Next few slides are like this.
I guess you know my slides better than I do. That's nice.
Yeah, this one works.
Yeah, so why not? It's an opportunity to do something cool, and again, it doesn't have to behave according to human norms. So, no evacuation, no health and safety. Awesome.
As an American, I think it's very interesting to listen to you talking about blowing up buildings.
Oh yeah, I mean, I told you we make borders, which is architecture, and then we try to
So my question is there any way that we could blow up the Tikutorn?
Well,
without people in it, of course.
That's a pointed question. See, I was talking about buildings which are multiplied. There is a lot of them, and if something happens, nothing actually happens. If something happens, it'll actually happen. So I don't think that's a good idea.
Versus things that happen that don't actually happen, but you don't know if it happened because
I think
I'm not
we
going to go
need-
anywhere with that.
Yeah, I think we need Jan back.
Right.
here.
Are there any more? Are there any more questions? Okay.
So, hey, one question that I always get when I talk with, or when I hear architects speaking is, like, I wonder if every architect wants to design their own house that they live in. And I got the opinion that you're quite a rebellious person, and that, you talk about all these borders that you'd like to be crossing, and that you have crossed. So do you have any, like, suggestions for people about borders to cross, like when designing their own, like, home environment, or when they're building their house? Or have you ever thought about what you'd like to cross when you do your own home?
I mean, see, I think that actually goes back to Jan's speech as well, something I thought about. Because when he was saying that everything is very deterministic in science, and then you have to force yourself to kind of be like, no, it's actually open-ended. In design, we do that every day. That's what we do. We don't have an end result. I mean, some genius architects maybe do, but that's, as they say, depends on the school you go to. But basically, you start with nothing. You make a model, and then you modify it, and modify it, and modify it again, and that's how you come up with the building. So the border crossing is actually the process of design. And the, how do you say it? The, goodness, what's the word in English? The attitude of not being scared of crossing those borders, because you have to do it anyway. It's like in our studio in Virginia Tech, we used to have this one great poster which said, make mistakes faster, which means don't procrastinate. You'll make that model and it'll be bad anyways. You'll have to redo it anyways. So why don't you do it right now instead of, right before the deadline? You'll get only more time to actually advance, So this is the process of design. You don't have anything preset. And then you have to cross, okay, the limitations are that, I can only build 2 floors. Maybe I can squeeze a terrace on the 3rd with a little glass so that I could see, like stuff like that starts happening all the time.
And what do you think, what's the reason we don't see that many shocking buildings popping up everywhere? Or like, you think that, wow, that's really creative. Is that like more of an economic thing, or are the architects like holding back? Or is it the architects like own creative process?
It's obviously a very complex question. There is a lot of limitations in architecture. Like the client wants a certain thing, the city official wants a different thing. And I don't know, whatever. The technology only allows you to do certain things. You can get you want a glass which is 5 meters long by 2.5 tall. Well, they don't make that in Estonia. So what do? Like stuff like that. But that gets into much deeper questions as well. And basically, to answer directly is it's the architects and the clients and the engineers. Blame everyone, basically. It has to work so perfectly for a great building to happen, like CCTV. Unlimited budget because you're working with China government directly. You have a country which wants to make itself, stand tall, so to say. So you give them a building which stands like that, which nobody has ever seen. So it's super iconic, And then the architects themselves are pretty awesome, and boom, it gets built, So it's just this confluence of different things.
Great answer, thanks.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. All right, Ivan, thank you very much.
Thank you.